Welcome to the Prison Professors Podcast. We serve people who face challenges with prosecution, sentencing, and prison. My co-founders are Sean Hopwood and Justin Paperny. My name is Michael Santos. We create digital content and our team offers individual consulting services. We also assist agencies that want to improve outcomes. To learn how we can help you, text the word PrisonPro to 44222. Again, text PrisonPro to 44222 and get our free brochure. You can also visit us at prisonprofessors.com or contact Justin at 818-424-2220. Please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes. Send confirmation that you reviewed our podcast and we'll send you a free digital book. Stay tuned for a 20 to 30-minute episode of Prison Professors. Welcome to the Prison Professors Podcast. I am Michael Santos. Today we have the privilege of listening and learning from Professor Aaron Kinzel. Did I pronounce your name right, Aaron?
Yes, Michael, that's it.
Aaron Kinzel, who I have had some intermediate communications with since I've come home from prison, but today I get to join the audience and learning about him. Aaron, tell us a little bit about your background. It's my understanding that you had your own challenges with the criminal justice system.
Yes, that's to say it lightly, Michael. So as a young kid, I grew up around a family that was just actively involved in criminality. So as a young kid, like many children or sponges, I picked up a lot of that and began into my teenage years becoming real heavily involved in crime, being involved in the juvenile justice system over several different instances, and eventually getting to the point where in my older teenage years, around 17, 18, heavily trafficking in narcotics, being addicted to drugs, firearms, gang activity, and a lot of this was in connection with family members who were, doing all kinds of criminal activity in the community.
Where are you from?
I grew up in Michigan, and I'm still currently in Michigan, and mostly rural areas, but I lived in the inner city off and on as well with my mother when I was really young. And just kind of picking up from the different things in my community and learning how to take a poverty situation and lack of resources and utilize like black market economies and illicit activities to kind of support myself and my family.
But despite that background, today you are leading, you're a leading community citizen. Tell us what you're doing right now.
I'm a professor of criminology and criminal justice at the University of Michigan, Dearborn, and my areas of expertise focus on public policy and incarceration. So I'm looking at what are some things that happen with the prison experience. What are things that happen that are more, I would say, like good in nature as far as like, learning mentorship. Myself going into the prison system at the age of 18, my claim to fame of like being redeemed was through a lot of the men who are lifers or long timers and who taught me about how to kind of like look at ways to not be aggressive and violent and use my mind in ways that I can actually help people instead of hurting people.
So that's interesting. It's a full circle that you've gone through from growing up in a criminal background and advancing to the highest levels of academia where you're a professor at a major university. Walk us through the first time you went into the criminal justice system and what your behavior was like during that first experience.
Okay. Again, 18 years old, to backtrack a little bit, I was in a violent confrontation with law enforcement. I was pulled over during a traffic stop, started a shootout with two state troopers.
Just a routine traffic stop resulted in a shootout, you said?
Yes. To say it nicely, Michael, I was a wacko kid. I was known to have firearms on me. I was abused as a child by many men that my mother was with. And like for me, having anybody in a confrontational situation with me, officer or whoever it may be, I got into a situation where I felt threatened and I became aggressive and violent as a response to that. So I started the shootout. Thankfully, no one was harmed. I went on a high-speed chase. I was found the next day. This was out of state in rural Maine. And I got picked up and was facing life in prison for the attempted murder of police officers. And fortunately for me, I spent a year and a half in the county jail and ended up only with a 19-year prison sentence.
Was that the first time you were actually taken into custody, or did you have some experiences as a juvenile being in custody as well?
Yeah, I did have 3 different instances where I was in the juvenile justice system. Again, like an assault on a police officer when I was a teenager, 15 years old, drug
charges. So 15 was the first time you came in?
Yes, that's correct. I was on probation when I was 15 years old as a juvenile. I violated that probation, ended up getting incarcerated 3 different times. And then also I was waived as a juvenile into the adult system at the age of 17. Michigan, you are an adult at the age of 17. So
And when you went into the criminal justice system at that age, what mindset did you have? What was your idea of what you would be doing with your life while you were in custody?
I had no direction at all, honestly. Like as a kid, like the only thing I knew at those teenage years was the dope life, the hustle life, of family that was involved in narcotics trafficking and street crime. So honestly, it didn't really do anything for me. I think it perpetuated a God complex for me because I didn't spend much time in the juvenile justice system. It wasn't really until I went to the prison with that 19-year bid that things started to change for me slightly, but I was still aggressive and violent and got into lots of fights and had this very adversarial relationship with the administration. But slowly over the years, incarcerated, again, lifers and men that have served long time taught me how to kind of like, get away from those feelings of aggression, use that passion and anger that I have inside myself to use my intellect and develop public policy solutions, do litigation against the system where I feel that myself and other prisoners were having our civil rights violated or something, to where so I could use my mind instead of my fists as a weapon.
As I understood you, your initial problems were in the state of Maine as an adult. Did you serve your time in the Maine State Prison then, or in a different state?
Yes, I did. So I was in, if you've ever seen the Shawshank Redemption, that was actually filmed in Ohio State Reformatory, but the prison is very comparable to the Maine State Prison in Thomaston, which has currently been demolished. But yeah, it was basically this old medieval penitentiary style complex. It was one of the oldest in the nation. And it was just old school, wrought iron and concrete and cold and dark, like dungeon style. And again, as a teenager going into that system, it's just really messed up situation. But I made my best through it, being as the person that I was, and my crime, honestly, like, as I'm sure the hierarchical structure with prisons where I had violence against law enforcement honestly made it real easy transition for me into the system. Like I was automatically given respect by a lot of the older prisoners, kind of like.
And when you were in there in the beginning, you said you adjusted to the ways of the penitentiary in the same way that many other people did. At what stage did you start becoming more receptive to the mentoring that you received from those longer-term prisoners who urged you to pursue education?
It took a while. I feel like it was seeds that were planted initially, but it didn't take, it wasn't automatic. It took several years for me to really start listening to a lot of these guys. I think probably halfway through my bid, so I ended up only serving 10 years and I got out on a mandatory parole. So maybe my 5th or 6th year, I started to really listen more and do more things where I got involved in a prison industries program, doing education, rehabilitative programs. And towards the end of my sentence, my 9th year in the system, I took a college course, and that honestly changed my life forever. That's what got me on this track to where when I came home on parole, I was under interstate compact with Maine to come back to Michigan. I started a community college. Like my first year out for reentry, I jumped right into a community college within a few months.
Well, I take it that was a high security penitentiary that you were in?
Yes, it was. It was a maximum security facility, and then off and on for at least a couple different years between county jail and the prison system, I was in solitary confinement, which would be a supermax.
And how did the other people in that high security penitentiary respond to your switch to start pursuing education, and particularly when you went into college? What was the level of support you received from them?
It was kind of like two different areas. So like a lot of the younger prisoners that I had hung around with, they weren't honestly too happy about me going from, aggressive and violence and doing dirt in the system to more of a relaxed, laid back lifer style and doing litigation and policy work and not stirring up stuff. But obviously the lifers and old timers gave me a lot of respect, a lot of mentorship, taught me, helped me to read, helped me to learn laws and policy and do things to educate myself and better myself profoundly. So I don't.
And what were you thinking that you would be doing with your life on the other side of the journey when you finished your prison term?
Honestly, I had no clue what the hell I was going to do when I came home. To me, I just knew that without an education, I was basically screwed. So jumped into community college, went into a business program, and with a violent crime and checking the box where, every time I tried to get fill out a job application, I'm telling them my criminal history, I could not find employment. So I got an associate's degree after 2 years with honors. I got a bachelor's degree a year later with honors. Throughout that entire time, 3-year period, I cannot find work for the life of me, and I'm trying everywhere. I'm trying hundreds of different job applications. So my change started to happen when I applied to graduate school at the University of Michigan. Towards the end of that time, I'm still not being able to find work. I just graduated. I still don't have a damn job. I did one internship at the end of my graduate program, and I'm like, well, shit, I've got to figure out something. So I went on to a doctorate program. And that was the first time I was actually, instead of me looking for employment and begging people to hire me, the university had actually talked to me and said, would you like to teach for us? Because minimum qualification to teach at a university is a master's degree. They're like, we'll teach this intro to CJ course. I did a couple guest lectures before that. They loved it. That was it. And they already knew my criminal history. That was what I call at that point where I came out of the convict closet per se and started utilizing my background as an asset in a sense to say, own my story, own my history. And I can't take back the crazy shit I did as a kid, but it gives me very unique insight into the criminal justice system. So they kept me on as an adjunct instructor. I actually dropped out of their PhD program because I was not in tune with sociology. I went back to the University of Michigan. Got into another doctorate program in education, which focuses more on curriculum development and programming. I go into prisons now and do consulting with the Department of Justice. I create curriculum now. I look at different educational things and programs that prisoners or juveniles need in the system and when they come home. And they hired me on at University of Michigan now too. So I teach there, and it's just been an incredible journey for me. Again, I think education, particularly higher education, has been the key to that success.
So do you work with a lot of other formerly incarcerated people?
Yes, I do. In Michigan, we have a very strong network. There's at least, I have probably 8 very close friends who are what I would consider heavy hitters, who've all spent, like myself, either 10, 20, 30 years in the prison system. One of them is connected with Just Leadership USA. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them. They're a national organization that empowers and helps leadership development for formerly incarcerated individuals nationwide. They have, I believe, over 300 people who've gone through this Columbia University training regimen where they're out, not necessarily just like I am in higher academia, but like they are in really substantial positions out in the community. They've overcome adversity and they're building their community. They're restoring their communities through their work and their profession. So I think stuff.
Is that Glenn Martin's group?
Yes, that is the group that Glenn Martin had founded. So he would be a perfect example of someone who did 6 years in the system out in New York, came out and decided, look, I don't like what's going on with the system, but his unique knowledge in that system helped him to develop this nonprofit and help connect with other nonprofit servicers, help people come back. The trauma that they face in the system, so many people don't realize how much it really messes people up, and the collateral consequences of conviction that people face, over 40,000 different legal sanctions that make it, possible to discriminate against people who have been in the justice system, which is just really ridiculous. So people like myself and others, I think we're living proof that just because we've been in the system doesn't mean we should be ostracized and left out here, because we can definitely change and redeem ourselves.
So if you were going to look back to when you began that journey in prison, what would you have done differently as a young man so that you maybe would have been able to be in a better position to overcome some of the challenges that you face? Can you give us any advice on that?
It was really tough for me because I was out of state. So, and even the family members that I had at home were not necessarily the best family members. So I think if you don't have family on the streets, that's the best thing. Obviously, if you have good family members that support you, you need to connect with them and help them find ways to really integrate back into society. But if you don't have that, connect with different religious groups, nonprofit groups, or people that are open to helping formerly incarcerated populations. And mentorship, I think, is a huge thing. I think a lot of people, particularly men in the system, have this hyper-masculine, I don't need any help, I'll do it all myself. If you can get rid of all that bullshit, that prison attitude where you're trying to protect yourself, be open and ask for help. I mean, I reached out to people. I wrote letters while I was incarcerated and connected with groups on the streets. If I would have done that more, I think that would have made my transition even smoother. And then just, when you come home, I think be honest about your situation. For me, I was not talking about my prison term for like the first 6 years I was home. I was just trying to pretend like it never happened.
Well, I'm looking back. I'm looking at the other side of the journey. At the time that you started, when I'm listening to you, and I think if I was still in prison and listening to this interview, I would be thinking, Wow, Aaron's telling us that he really didn't find education until you were very deep into your prison term.
Yes.
What change or what level of influence do you think that would have had if you started your educational path at the start of your journey instead of at the 6th year or the 9th year of your prison term?
Oh, I think that would have made a phenomenal difference. I mean, it's honestly like one of the problems that I had. Like, I came right out and it was like I was starting over from scratch. Like, I was a kid that just got out of high school. You know, I had no job skills, no any type of academic studies behind my belt. So if I would have done more of that in the institutions, absolutely. So I guess my advice would be people who are in the system, if there are higher education opportunities, take them. If there are rehabilitative programs, and just read. Self-help is like a phenomenal thing that can really help build yourself up as well. Like, I read hundreds and hundreds of books, whether it be philosophy, on education, whatever it may be. If you can just enrich your mind, I think you're opening yourself up to a different type of a paradigm when you come out on the streets and look at the world in a little different way.
If you're starting a prison journey and you're far away from home like Aaron was, that is a great place to get mentors, as he just described, just from reading books. If you read books, yes, those authors can be delivering a message that can change the way we think. And if we change the way we think, we can begin building a stronger support network that can help us on the other side of the journey. But the really important takeaway that I'm hearing from Aaron is, even if you do get an education, you've got to learn to expect and anticipate that the job market is not always going to be friendly to you. What have you experienced now that, besides the University of Michigan, where you're a professor, if you were going to go into the job market now, even though you're have your doctorate degree, do you anticipate that you would still face challenges in the job market, or do you anticipate that things are different now that you are nearing your terminal degree?
I think it would still be difficult for me, but what I've learned over the years is, again, owning that incarceration experience, owning the damage that you cause to the community, and be honest about that. But also networking. Now, like, I think one of the biggest claims to fame that I've been able to really get these bigger and more substantial positions is the fact of the people that I know. You need to know people who are in positions of power. Currently, my boss is a former judge out of Washtenaw County, Judge Donald Shelton. He's the one that brought me on. And I'm sure that there was problems with, considering to bring me on as a faculty member. But when someone has power and believes in you and believes in the possibility of redemption, those are the people you need to connect with. You need to connect with people that have that open mind to be able to support you. Because if people don't vouch for you, then you're honestly screwed. Like, I wasted my time filling out hundreds of applications, begging people or just trying to get in the door. Go talk to people. Go meet to people. Volunteer your time. And I think that's a way for you to develop a work ethic, and also other people will see that you have redemptive qualities too.
In addition to getting support from the University of Michigan and this judge, I've looked at your curriculum vitae, which we'll make available on our show notes at prisonprofessors.com.
Yeah.
But I've noticed that you've also been very successful in getting grants from not one, but many, many different organizations.
Yes.
That measure in the tens of thousands of dollars over the course of your journey.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about your process for going to pursue financial support from these organizations that issued the grants.
Well, my joke is, I call it, as a drug dealer, as a young kid, you learned how to hustle money. So in a way, I'm using those skills, those soft skills, in a legitimate fashion. So I'm learning how to beg for money in the financial realm with nonprofits and grants. So these grants, I feel, have been very pivotal in a lot of my work, because I want to look at different ways that we can empower formerly incarcerated populations. I work with my students for a lot of these grants that I've gotten to take them on different trips to prisons or meet with formerly incarcerated people in the corrections field, because some of these students are going to become cops or judges or DAs or whatever part they're going to be of the CJ system. So I'm trying to stack the deck, honestly, Michael. I want to change the perspective of some of these youth, because in the next 10, 20 years, they're going to be the ones running this country. So I would rather have more open-minded, progressive individuals who are getting experiential opportunities. I don't want these kids to go into prison, for real, and have the experience I did, but vicariously through myself, others, and people that are involved in the system. How can we let them cast a shadow on the problem system? I don't think the criminal justice system is broken. I think it's doing exactly what it was designed to do, which was oppress and marginalize certain communities with mass incarceration. We're over-incarcerating people. We need to look at people that are really a danger to society, and even those people 95% of the people are coming home. So how are we going to treat these people in the system through human rights and treat them as individuals and let, when they come home, allow them to, acclimate back into society. So that's what I try to do, is reduce those stigmas.
What we're also hearing in your story is that you were also successful in getting some of these correctional systems to hire you. Besides giving you money as grants, some of your clients now, as you said, are actually from law enforcement, including organizations like the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Can you walk us through how you turned these people that used to make you stand up for count and provide you with food and meals is now sending you a paycheck to hire you for your services?
So the irony is I met the former director of the Michigan Department of Corrections years ago, and we had a nice chat, and she mentioned to me how she was going to be doing some consulting work with the Department of Justice, particularly the Bureau of Prisons. And she asked me to come on for some training modules that they were doing with this executive excellence seminar, which looks at, county jail sheriffs, correctional leaders, wardens, regional managers, et cetera, like on best practice, teach them about best practices about the system. So my unique thing is, I tell them my story of where I'm at today. I don't necessarily drop the convict bomb right away, but then they get interested about my work and talk about how they can develop more rehabilitative programs, education, and treat not offenders, but treat them as, human beings or clients per se. And they're really open to it. And then I tell them, I was through the system, and they're just shocked. Certainly there's going to be some people that are not cool with it at all, but I've gotten more business through those initial interactions. I think people just don't realize that someone that goes through this crazy shit in the system can come out clean on the other side. So I think I'm changing perspectives that way too. And I'm getting correctional leaders to think about people in the system in a different light. Maybe if they did offer more programs, and that even increases, their safety in the system for their officers, for their staff. If they have a more educated population, it's going to reduce violence. It's going to clear up a lot of problems and overcrowding with the system. So it's a win-win for everybody.
Not only can you disrupt the mindset of the staff members who are now bringing you on as a consultant and giving you a paycheck or a contract to develop curriculum for them, but you're also disrupting the mindset of people in prison who think that the best way to get through a journey in prison is to adapt to the ways of the penitentiary. And one of the lessons that our team at Prison Professors always tries to disseminate is that if you behave in the ways of the penitentiary, you're going to get the outcome of the penitentiary. But if you want to have the type of outcome that you are living right now, Aaron, an individual really has to start reading books, start finding better mentors, start building a stronger support network, start holding himself accountable, start becoming aware of opportunities that are available that he can seize. And all of those different tasks are fundamentally different from what we hear in the prison system. When I went to prison, I used to hear this message of the best way to serve time is to forget about the world outside.
I heard that same thing.
Time in prison. What did you experience during that 10-year journey that you served?
Well, I heard the same thing. A lot of people, they try to disconnect, and it's understandable because it's such a trauma to be separated from your family, your loved ones, so you try to forget about the outside world. But honestly, that's the worst thing that you can possibly do. When you make those disconnects with family and the community, you are becoming, institutionalized, more or less. And there's all kinds of literature on that, where you become so isolated from the streets, you develop this prison mentality, this violence, this aggression, this hyper-masculine bullshit. It's just a detriment to who you are and what you can become. And I challenge people to look outside the box.
It's a message, unfortunately, that they get every day that they're in there, which is why I feel very strongly, and our team at Prison Professors feels very strongly about bringing the inspiring messages that you can deliver, Aaron, because I think that although staff members or people who work in the profession of corrections may be somewhat resistant to having formerly incarcerated people, given the message, the reality is that the people that they're serving, you have a higher level of credibility with them because they're seeing themselves in you, and they're saying, if Aaron can do it, maybe I can do it as well. Is that, when you said that you go back into prisons today, what is your role, and in what capacity do you go back into prisons to teach?
There's a lot of different capacities, but the one I'll premise the most right now is some work through the University of Michigan. The Prison Creative Arts Project is a national project that goes inside all the state facilities here in Michigan. We curate art from prisoners, and we have the largest national show of prisoner art in the nation every year in March. That's coming up, and I can give you that link as well if you're interested in sharing that. But as a part of that project, we also go in and do workshops that look at different humanities and artistic forms of expression, whether that's visual arts, theatrical performance, or different types of writing through poetry or different literature. This gives people inside that opportunity to meet not just myself, but other students at the University of Michigan. So the students are able to humanize the prisoners inside the system, and the prisoners inside are able to see that people on the streets actually will look beyond their transgressions if they just, open up to them and get rid of that. Again, that prison mentality. Just be normal and be authentic. I think it's great to have this interaction. That's a problem with the system, is where so many people are isolated. They don't get that everyday interaction or contact with people from the streets who are really good people and can share with them knowledge and mentorship and get away from just the same old BS on the yard or the block or the weight room, all that same drama and gossip that happens every day in the penitentiary.
If you follow that path of adjusting to the prison in the way that you are describing, you become more vulnerable to those different collateral consequences that you described.
Absolutely.
When you follow somebody after they get out of prison. Give us a quick rundown on those collateral consequences as you see that follow somebody who came out of the prison system. What can they expect?
Well, so the biggest ones that I faced upon release, first and foremost, I could not find housing. So honestly, I had a family member illegally get housing for me, rented a place. That was the only way that I could get a place to stay. I mean, people that have a record, I'll be honest, you're going to struggle to find housing. They do background checks, they do credit checks, and all that information comes up. And depending on the severity of your charge, regardless of the charge, honestly, you're going to face barriers. Employment is another one, as I mentioned before, filling out that job application, and ban the box initiatives nationwide are very important to kind of give people that opportunity to not just check a box on an application that says I'm a convicted felon, but get that face-to-face time. So you got to go meet people in person. You got to go do more than just fill out an application and check that box.
How about credit and healthcare, access to credit and healthcare besides housing and employment? What kind of experience have you had with both of those complications? So healthcare was initially a problem when I first came out, but now with the current healthcare laws where Medicaid has been expanded to most states, not all, I had Medicaid for years when I came home, and now I currently have healthcare to the university. But yeah, that's a problem. If you're in a state that does not have access to that expanded Medicaid program, you're screwed. So, your health is certainly a problem in the system. I feel like every time anybody goes and spends 1 year in the prison, it's like that adds or takes away 3 or 4 years from your life. The different things that you're facing inside. Did you have any challenges with getting integrated with the credit market and financing to make large purchases like vehicles or real estate or anything like that?
Yeah. So, and the way that you can circumvent those issues is, so when I came home, I had no credit, which honestly I've been told is way worse than even having bad credit because you have no history whatsoever. So I was fortunate enough to have family members that would co-sign car notes for me, rent a place, and that began a history for me. Another big thing that most people don't know about if they have no credit history, you can go to banks and get these collateral loans where you can put up, $400 or $500. They put it aside. Getting that kind of money I know is an issue, but then you can start developing a credit history. I think that's extremely important for people coming home. You have to develop a credit history because you can't get anything without credit nowadays. They run a not background check, but a credit check, for phone service, for utilities, for anything. So if you don't have good credit, you're screwed. And I was able.
How long have you been home now, Aaron?
Say that again.
How long have you been home now?
This is this March will be my 11th year home, Michael. So it's been kind of weird, and I'm still honestly still adjusting after more than 10 years home. I feel like every year I did inside, it's taken me a year to kind of smooth out back on the streets and just deal with the trauma from inside, deal with the isolation, the lack of resources. I've just been building myself. I feel like now, more than 10 years out, I feel like I'm in a good place and I'm kind of leveled out. Almost kind of eliminating that, that situation, spending a decade in the penitentiary. But people got to realize when you come home, it's going to be weird, especially those of you that are doing big time. when you come home, like, don't be afraid to talk to people about it. Don't be afraid to, be like, I'm anxious, or I feel weird in social situations, or my best advice is just, try to dive in and do the best you can and try to acclimate and meet people who are supportive of.
And I would suggest that you look to role models like Professor Aaron Thomas Kinzel, who served 10 years in the Maine State Prison System, but came back, found his calling in education, and has been giving back to society ever since. It's taken him 11 years to feel strong and whole, and we heard his story here on Prison Professors, and I hope that if you're listening to this episode while you're inside of an institution, you will look to Aaron for the wisdom, to the wisdom and the guidance that you can use to apply to your own journey in prison. We've come to the end of this episode. Aaron, do you have any final words that you might want to offer to people who are either going into the criminal justice system or are serving time right now?
People going into the system, not so much, but people who've been in the system and coming home, I think it's very important for people who've been inside and the family members of those who have family members inside. You need to become a part of the solution. I do also a lot of public policy lobbying to try to reform the criminal justice system. We need people with that voice who lived in the shadows of the penitentiaries to talk about that experience, bring it to light. Over the last few years, we've seen a lot of things in media where it's becoming more, CJ reform is becoming the new hotness. Tell your story. Share it with people and consider running for office. Go out and vote. Don't just sit there and feel that you are not a part of the process, because even though some states do have restrictions on felons voting, a lot of states don't. So get out there, vote, community organize, connect with people, support prosecutors, DAs who have progressive mindsets that can help, reduce mass incarceration as a whole.
And that's what we're trying to do here at Prison Professors. So if you'd like to be a part of the solution, give us a call. Let's disrupt the narrative of what people expect can happen to people in the prison system. And let's think about what are the best possible outcomes we can get. I see one of the best possible outcomes in stories like Aaron Thomas Kinzel, and I hope to hear you on the Prison Professors podcast. I am Michael Santos with Prison Professors, and we hope to hear from you soon. If you would like information on how to become a part of the program, visit us at prisonprofessors.com or send a text message of Prison Pro to 44222. That's text Prison Pro to 44222 so that you can be a part of our policy initiatives. Thanks so much. Back tomorrow with another inspiring guest.